When it comes to world building, one of the most enticing things you can throw in is a big neon sign that says, "Do not enter." It's the inherent contrarian curiosity of the indomitable human spirit that drives us to climb every mountain, push every button, and open every door, especially the ones that someone's gone to the trouble of nailing shut. When there are great powers at work in the universe, it's the forbidden ones we want to know more about. And it's not just rebelliousness driving this impulse, although that is definitely a factor. For something to be forbidden, there has to be a paradigm that forbids it. Just by including the idea that some powers are walled off or even simply feared, a space of fantasy world building can immediately gain richness and depth. Suddenly, there's the implication of past horrors or cautionary tales or some higher authority trying to dictate who gets what powers and when. Magic is no longer just magic, a flat space of uniform impossibilities. It becomes an iceberg, and the things that lurk at its deepest points are what naturally draws our eye down. One interesting factor is that forbidden powers are usually only present in stories where the power in question could hypothetically be available to anyone, like stories where magic is a field of study rather than a sorcerous inborn superpower that only a chosen few can access. This is because there's no point in forbidding something that's impossible for most people anyway. Those settings can still have dangerous or evil powers that are generally frowned upon, but in order for a power to be forbidden, there has to be a chance of someone accessing it in the first place. So forbidden powers tend to be tied into magic systems where knowledge is the root of power, and anyone suitably trained and taught could theoretically do anything. Or the concept can be tied into magic systems where powers are drawn from external forces like gods, and the question of where you choose to draw your power from is up to the characters, with some sources being more advisable than others. For an easy point of reference, one of the most archetypical forbidden powers in modern media is found in Star Wars, with, of course, the dark side of the Force. It's slightly unusual in that it's really only available to a pretty small number of Force-sensitive people in the first place, but any of those Force-sensitive people could tap into the dark side very easily. It's forbidden by the Jedi because it's powered by a death spiral of negative emotions, and it sort of makes you crazy and evil. When the Jedi reject it, it's not because it's illegal to get mad, it's because they're striving for balance and peace, and while plunging into an abyss of misery and bloodlust could let them shoot lightning out of their hands, that's not the goal of getting in tune with the Force, which is a lot more Journey to Enlightenment coded than it is an anime power-up of the week. Sure, the Sith can shoot lightning out of their hands, but the Jedi can transcend death and come back as badass ghosts with all the powers they had in life, so like, who's the real asshole, right? The reason why our heroes reject the dark side is because it's easy to fall into anger and hatred, but the only way to get out of the cycle of destruction is to not do that. As such, the power is forbidden and its practice is highly frowned upon. Read License to Get Bisected by a Lightsaber. But like a lot of the world building in Star Wars, the exact parameters of this forbiddenness can be left a little vague in the movies themselves. Did all the Jedi forbid it, or was it a small group of them, or did the Force itself somehow reach out and say, definitely don't use me while pissed off, lest you get saddled with some really crazy contact lenses and an extremely expensive skincare routine? Where's the tipping point where a Jedi has officially experienced enough anger to start channeling the dark side? Since the Force is a very soft magic system, this is all left a little vague and vibes-based. But we do understand pretty clearly, dark side bad, dark side also kind of alluring, don't listen to it, and definitely don't do what it says. Now, one of the doylest reasons a story could bring in the concept of forbidden powers is to explain away a fundamental world-building question that tends to naturally crop up from any sufficiently hefty magic system. If there's something story-breakingly powerful in this setting, why isn't everyone using it? For example, if it's possible in this setting to resurrect the dead, why is anyone still dead? Of course, this question has a lot of potential answers. In some stories, resurrection is possible but very costly. Maybe it can only be done by exchanging a life, for example, or it has a very negative impact on the person being brought back, or it's situational and can only be done under very specific circumstances that don't happen very often. Or it's just plain expensive, and the only people who get to come back are the ones that can pay, if you want the real capitalist hellscape dystopia version. If a power being universally accessible would dramatically change the world from the way the writer wants it to work, they need to provide a reason for why it isn't everywhere. And conveniently for us, a lot of those reasons end up under the umbrella of the forbidden power, since by its very definition, explaining why most people can't do something is kind of the same thing as explaining why and how it's forbidden to them. The most textbook exactly what it says on the box forbidden power is one that is intentionally forbidden by a governing authority of some kind. These powers are forbidden because someone with a lot of social power says nobody else gets to have it. Essentially, these forbidden powers are in-universe just illegal. Of course, because I said so isn't a reason in and of itself. It's a bid to authority on top of whatever the actual reason is. So why is this system of authority denying this power? What is it about the power that makes them want to forbid it, and how exactly do they go about doing that? And for that matter, who are they to decide what everyone does and doesn't get to do? Why is this authority in place? Why do they get to dole out the privilege of power? And what's their personal interest in ensuring nobody else gets to climb too high? Now, while these are all very interesting questions, in many stories this concept concept isn't explored to anywhere near this level of depth. Sometimes all we get is, ooh, the forbidden world building, and we leave it at that. But it's immediately obvious why this question can be really worth delving into. It opens up all kinds of questions about systems of power, how those who have power have a vested interest in keeping it out of the hands of the people they have power over. And even if the forbidden power is legitimately tremendously dangerous and the authority trying to keep it under wraps isn't aiming to do anything more nefarious than protecting an innocent world from a danger they barely understand, there's still some really interesting conversations to be had there. Why do they have the authority to decide who can and can't be trusted with knowledge? And frankly, is it better to keep the dangerous power locked away, or is it better to understand it fully and potentially find safe uses for it, or ways to limit how dangerous it can really be? Plus, one of the most common plot points around an exceptionally dangerous forbidden power is a protagonist willingly sacrificing themselves by using it to save somebody else. What's the larger scale cost of that? What does it unleash? Who did this before that led to it being forbidden in the first place? And what are the consequences? If they're bad enough, it might really help drive home why this thing was forbidden to begin with. Whatever the reason or the justification, these powers are forbidden by somebody. Anyone who tries to use them either has to get through the forbidden authority first or be quick enough to outrun them afterwards. This is a recipe for easy antagonism and strong character motivation. If you tap into a forbidden power, the magic police are gonna get your ass, so you better have a really good reason for cracking open that Necronomicon. These reasons naturally vary from character to character. Protagonists with more heroic motivations might tap into forbidden powers to protect or help their loved ones, while more villainous characters are usually motivated by a simple hunger for power. Whatever the cause, just getting close to a forbidden power can be enough to get the magic police riled up, and now your story has conflict, and potentially a healthy dose of mystery as well. The mystery element can pop up because one very popular first step for forbidding a power from the masses is by keeping it secret. After all, theoretically, one of the easiest ways to ensure nobody does anything too dangerous is by not even letting the idea enter their heads in the first place. This is also helpful from a narrative standpoint because secrets are really useful inciting incidents for protagonists and antagonists alike. When a setting makes a big deal about any sort of secret forbidden power, it is almost guaranteed that our main character is going to enter the plot by falling face first directly into it. And if they don't, the main bad guy definitely will. Thus, our story establishes itself by immediately dropping our primary characters through the cracks of a system dedicated to preventing them from ever finding out the system wasn't already watertight. Now, either our protagonist or our primary threat is running around with access to knowledge and/or power that nobody is supposed to have, and the rest of the story has to scramble to deal with that. Plus, if the power is secret enough, our hero might have no idea what kind of boundaries or limitations it might have. They might not even know what set it off in the first place. There's a hefty amount of overlap between this part of the trope and the secret world setting, a common staple of urban fantasy where a seemingly normal world is underpinned by a secret underworld of magic and/or monsters that conceals itself from the people who think they live in reality. Settings like this usually forbid secret world magical people from revealing their nature and existence to normal people, and a breach in the masquerade is almost always the main inciting incident that drags our hapless every protagonist into the fray. And of course, if secrecy is paramount and our protagonist suddenly knows that terrible secret, that's a recipe for immediate antagonism from people who think it would be better for everyone if the secret died with them. Secrets also have the major benefit that, after you keep something secret for long enough, eventually everyone who knows about it will die, and the secret will no longer require active maintenance to stay secret. This means if your world building has an ancient forbidden power, there's a possibility it's been forbidden for so long that nobody remembers the danger anymore. Fun fact, this is a real concern for the real field of nuclear semiotics. The question of how to construct a nuclear waste warning that people will still A, understand, and B, actually take seriously in the very distant future is a complicated one, because once the danger is forgotten, any danger do not enter sign starts looking like, please don't dig up my cool glowing buried treasure, that would be so bad. In a more fantastical setting, this can lead to situations where it is known that a power is forbidden, but it's not really known why anymore, meaning people who think that power might be useful don't know why they shouldn't just pop the top off and see what exciting genie comes out of the bottle. And even the people who want to stop that from happening aren't necessarily fully prepared for what they're about to deal with because they've forgotten what to expect. Secret forbidden powers are also fun because it frequently turns out they're forbidden for much more impactful reasons than just someone doesn't want you to have them. This category can include things like ancient eldritch gods, sanity-shredding horrors from beyond reality, and secrets man was not meant to know. There might be powers to be gained from these experiences, but they're almost definitely not worth the price. This is how Fullmetal Alchemist handles the question of resurrection. Alchemy can do almost anything as long as it follows the principle of equivalent exchange, so why shouldn't it be able to bring someone back from the dead? It's known that human transmutation like that is taboo, but who cares? If it's a choice between following some vaguely defined rules with nobody around to even enforce them versus seeing your dead loved one again, that's obviously no choice at all. Of course, what our heroes find out in their pre-episode 1 inciting incident is that it turns out human transmutation isn't just taboo, it's impossible, because in the equivalent exchange equation, nothing can equal the value of the lost human soul. Trying gets you temporarily yeeted out of reality into a featureless white void where the closest closest thing the story has to a god steals your organs and calls you a bitch. And if that's your only goal, congrats! You found the secret technique for meeting God. But if you were dead set on the whole resurrection thing working out, sorry bud, better luck next time, and in the future maybe pack a couple spare parts. Secret forbidden powers can also be secret because they've only just been invented. This is where forbidden powers can overlap with the trope of secret techniques, where the reason why this dangerous ability isn't breaking the world building is that only one person currently knows how to do it. Secret forbidden techniques aren't forbidden for any outside enforcement reasons for the most part, but the knowledge of how they work is proprietary, and the person who knows it is probably not super inclined to share. Because this ability is currently only known to one person, it doesn't break the world building for the power in question to be super busted, since there's no real risk of it breaching containment and becoming so universal that it fundamentally reshapes the way the world works. It does, however, usually prompt one slightly tricky world building question. Why and how is this the first/only person in history to ever figure this out? Again, this is a question with a lot of possible answers, but it does require an answer, especially if the secret forbidden technique doesn't actually seem all that complicated in practice. Usually the answer is one of three options. It's incredibly difficult and requires a lot of precise technical skill in the execution, it's ridiculously dangerous and has the potential to obliterate the user regardless of their skill level, or it's so situational that the circumstances that prompted its invention have literally never happened before. This is kind of how Avatar: The Last Airbender handles bloodbending. It's a secret waterbending technique invented by one waterbending master in a really desperate situation, and as a fun bonus, it's implied that part of the reason why it never seems to have occurred to anyone to try it before is that it's seen as completely morally reprehensible and profoundly disturbing. Waterbending is usually framed as kind of this gentle, healing art that is, obviously dangerous when used correctly, but ultimately it's got a culture very based around being in tune with the flow of nature and such. So imposing your will on the inside of somebody else's body is perceived as this horrific violation. So it kind of makes sense that the only person who's ever thought to try it was one person in a really bad situation, and the one person she taught it to really hated that she knew how to do it. This is around the point where secret forbidden powers can start bleeding into the related subcategory of vaguely forbidden powers. These are powers that aren't explicitly illegal by any meaningful metric, they're just widely considered to be bad ideas. Without outside enforcement keeping them forbidden, these powers usually have some internal caveat for why they're not everywhere. Usually they're difficult, dangerous, and/or deeply disturbing in a way that freaks everyone out. If they're icky or scary enough, most people just won't touch them unless they're desperate. It's fairly common for things like blood magic to fall into this category, tossed in the yucky bin simply because blood is gross. The forbidden part of the powers in question might even be considered just common sense. Who in their right mind would ever awaken the ancient evil, / venture into the sealed lands, / strike a bargain with a demon, / try to harness the power of the darkness, / etc, etc, etc. Everyone knows that's a bad idea, which is why we don't do it. While these can certainly be fun, they lack a certain amount of the spice of a truly forbidden power. It's all well and good for a side character to say, "No way! They've harnessed the forbidden magics!" And that can certainly make the person who harnessed said forbidden magic sound very cool and based, but if the forbidding is just kind of implied to make our badass hero seem like the kind of cool kid who won't be stopped by that sign because they can't read, it's really just lip service. It tells us nothing except that our hero is bolder than the average background character and that's why they call him the boss. But it does tap into what is arguably the beating heart of the forbidden power trope. After all, we can talk all we want about nebulous authoritative bodies and magic police and secret world enforcement, but when it comes down to it, there's only one person who can really decide what it means for a power to be forbidden: the person who's seeking it. Is the power seeker hesitant because they're afraid of retaliation from the authority that's keeping the power walled off? Are they just worried about getting in trouble? Or are they struggling internally with the morality of that power and whether or not they should have it, or if anyone should have it? Do they think the power should be democratized, or are they a secret keeper guarding it from those who would use it for harm? What relationship do they have with the power they're seeking, and what does it mean to them that this power is forbidden? In Dungeon Meshi, Marcille reveals a little ways into Season 1 that her magical field of study and expertise is actually ancient magic, more colloquially known as black magic, the study of summoning demons and crafting dungeons. It is so very illegal, a status actively enforced by the elves, who confiscate any relevant artifacts and arrest anyone caught even in proximity to it. But Marcille firmly holds that it's completely fine to bypass these laws and cover up the evidence afterwards because, as far as she's concerned, magic has no inherent morality. It's just a tool that can be used in different ways. Just because the magic is feared and thought of as evil doesn't mean it actually is, and she wants to study it to understand it better and find ways to use it to help people. So of course she has zero qualms about busting out her secret taboo dark magic if it means resurrecting her dearest friend. The fact that it's forbidden, illegal, and dangerous literally doesn't matter to her. And when everything does start to fall apart later on, she's still firmly in the camp that what they have to do is figure out the problem and find a solution, rather than simply throw up their hands and say it was because the magic was evil all along. It really drives home that she's a scholar first and foremost, who takes a pretty long-term view on everything, for reasons that make sense. There's a similar level of wizard hubris on display in Fullmetal Alchemist. Our heroes don't know going into it that human transmutation is impossible, but they know it's the fundamental alchemy taboo, and they could probably infer that there must be a reason why people aren't doing it all the time, even if it is illegal. But it is with the boundless confidence of a couple of child prodigies that they just kind of assume they can pull it off if they just don't tell anybody they did anything wrong. It's the heartbreaking logic of a child that the primary danger they can conceive of at this point is that they could get in trouble, and it fully doesn't even occur to them that it might be taboo because it's unbelievably dangerous and they'll be dealing with its consequences for the rest of their lives. On the flip side, back to bloodbending again, this technique isn't forbidden by any outside authority because basically nobody knows it exists. It's just so profoundly upsetting for Katara to override anyone's will and autonomy that she treats it like a horrific forbidden taboo and only uses it once after being forced to learn it. It's only her own moral code that classifies it as a horrific forbidden technique, and since she's the only one who can do it, that's the only authority that needs to forbid it. A forbidden power can be forbidden by as few as one person and still kind of count in the vibes of the storytelling. Who decides a thing is forbidden? Who decides what that means? It seems like the authority that forbids it is the one who gets to decide, but in practice, a rule like that has to be enforced on both ends. The person who makes the rule, and the person who decides whether or not to follow it. And that decision is usually informed by a number of factors. Why is that rule in place? What is its purpose? Under what circumstances was it created? Who benefits? Who suffers? What is the cost of its enforcement? What's the cost of breaking it? What would it look like if the rule wasn't there? I hesitate to get too deep into this next example because its anime adaptation only just started and I don't want to spoil too much, but having read through the entire manga so far, I can say with confidence that unpacking these questions seems to be the entire purpose of Witch Hat Atelier, a story set in a world where magic is supposedly only possible for a chosen few born with the talent to be witches. Spoilers for episode 1, but this is a lie, and a very intentional one. There was a time when magic was available to everyone, and the world was dramatically reshaped in the process. Naturally, there were wars, chaos, mass deaths, horrific war crimes, etc. So now magic is available to only a select few, and whole schools of magic have been completely forbidden, with those who violate the rules stripped of their memories and permanently exiled. Magic that affects the body or the mind is entirely illegal, except, of course, for the memory erasing that the witches have to do to maintain their monopoly on power. So great, that sounds like a totally solid plan. That means no warping people into monsters, no manipulating people's minds, no healing magic. No fixing people who've been illegally magically changed. No magical limb prosthetics for the disabled. No unpetrifying our protagonist's mother, sealed in stone in episode 1 because our hero had no idea what spell she was drawing or what it was going to do. And certainly no teaching magic to normal people. They'll just have to rely on the proprietary and carefully curated magical contraptions that the witches craft and sell them instead. And of course they don't have the right to repair those objects because that might involve them knowing how magic works, and that, we can't have that, that's super illegal. They're just gonna have to keep buying more magical contraptions and spending money. Which I'm sure has nothing to do with any of this. It's just an interesting thing that's happening. This world has already seen what happens when true magic is available to everyone. Wonders and horrors in equal measure. But the world as it is now is its own kind of nightmare, rife with injustice and wrongs that our heroes could so easily fix if they didn't mind violating the rules and consequentially being stripped of their memories, thrown out of the system, and prevented from ever helping anyone again. Our heroes are constantly aware of the limitations placed on them, constantly trying to find the ways to do the most good and help the most people without outright breaking those rules, and it's hard and horrible, and now magic, this thing that should bring so much joy, becomes a terrible weight tipping the scales of the world. Faced with so much chaos and cruelty and innocent people suffering, it becomes impossible not to question the system as it stands. It can't possibly be just, and it can't possibly be the only way to keep the world from falling into chaos. Can it? At time of this recording, the manga is currently unfinished, so I don't know where all of this is going. I don't usually talk about stories before they're done, but even in this unfinished state, I've never seen a more impactful exploration of the concept of forbidden magic. It's a trope that's practically taken for granted in fantasy world building. Some spells have to be forbidden. If magic makes anything possible, then there have to be limits or the world would explode from all the 10th level fireballs going off. But who sets those limits? Who enforces them? And who suffers from them? It's usually not the powerful entrenched spellcasters who have a bad time. It's the people who would most benefit from that forbidden magic who find themselves running up against the implacable enforcement of the rules rules, TM. A system of power almost always benefits those in power, and usually keeps the power where the people in power can see it. But who sets down the rules on that power? Who watches the watchmen? And does a rule mean anything if the person on the other end of it says no? So, yeah.
All the good girls go to hell, 'cause even God herself has enemies. And once the water starts to rise and heaven's out of sight, she'll want the devil on her team. My Lucifer is lost.